I want to talk about what it really takes to become a story artist. I've been at this for almost 20 years now, and it hasn't always been easy. In fact, this is extremely difficult, but I will say it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I've had this passion ever since I was a kid, ever since I was really young. I always wanted to work in animation and work in films. This is one of the things I've always wanted to do. And regardless of how painful it was and how difficult the struggle was, I would be doing this anyway. So I think what I want to talk about is that type of passion and the struggle that you need to be doing. It turns into less of a struggle if you actually love what it is that you're doing, even though it's really, really hard, because you're not going to be good at it at first. You may not be good at the drawing. You may not be good at the composition stuff, all the technical things that you have to struggle with as you're working your way up to becoming a storyboard artist. Now, I will say, so let me point out a couple practical things that you can do to get yourself there. One, I think you just need that. What I mentioned, you need that passion that's going to carry you through those hard times as you're battling and working on your technique to get up into the higher ranks and be working on the projects that you want to be working on. So that you need just kind of as a given because that'll carry you through the times when it's really hard and you can't imagine yourself putting any more effort in, and you have to battle through it, and it's like, you might have to make sacrifices, economic sacrifices with your family, sacrifices maybe even with your relationships. I even did some of that when I was coming up. I didn't have very many relationships because I was totally focused on my art. So what I think you need to be doing, and this is all part of like this holistic method of getting your procedure in order so that you can make the necessary steps, and these are baby steps, working all the way up so that you can eventually do the stuff that you want to be doing. You need to be capable of doing that kind of stuff. So right from the get-go, it's possible. If I did it, you guys can do it. I'm no genius. I'm no incredible Michelangelo. I'm no fantastic person. What I do have is an incredible drive to continue. I had the discipline and just the desire to make this happen, right? So that you have to do. So let's talk a little bit about the practical things. Now, not many people mention this, but there's an economic factor in creating your dreams, right? In making your dreams come true, you have to be able to give yourself the runway and the bandwidth to do it. So I was very fortunate and lucky that out of high school, I went to art school, and at art school, I had the dedicated time to work on my art and work on myself. That's all I chose to do. So, I did the typical, I took out some student loans, and I had some money from my parents, and they helped me out. But it was a gigantic risk if I think about it. I didn't have this in my head at the time, but to take out an extraordinary amount of money in loans and do something that's completely unproven for my young 18-year-old self and assume that I'm going to be successful at the end, that's a huge risk looking at it now. Back then, I jumped right in, and I was scared. I was honestly scared out of my mind that I wouldn't be able to do it. I still had those fears that I wouldn't make it until the end and become a professional artist. Regardless, I kept going, and there were points where I got the correct feedback to be able to improve myself. Okay, so in that moment, in that dedicated time, I had the ability to work on my stuff. I could work on my drawing. I could fail. I could do things that didn't work, and people would critique me and give me the advice I needed, okay? So out of that dedicated time, and like I said, it becomes economic because if you're working at a job right now, so let's say you have a job that's unrelated to art, okay? But you might even have an art job. You might be an animator that is a badass animator, but you want to get into a different discipline. So how do you do that working the job that you're doing and moving into the work that you want to be doing? You're essentially going to have to do nights and weekends, right? So that includes a sacrifice. You also need to have some kind of balance, right? You don't want to kill yourself. So what it takes is that. So give yourself some kind of runway. So one thing is, if you're working at a job now, be smart and have some savings, okay? So continue, do whatever it takes to have a little bit of a nest egg so that when you're ready to make that leap, that you can have that money to hold you over for the time that you need to be focusing on your stuff. Even if it's a couple months that you can do between freelance jobs that you can spend on yourself, I mean, the amount of improvement, if you're really dedicated, in 1 month when you're free of doing anything else, like nobody's giving you a phone call, nobody's bugging you and knocking at your door, and all you're doing is drawing and focusing on the things that you need to be focusing on, the improvement is incredible. You will gain so much out of that stuff. So one, you need that runway, and like I said, look hard at your economics and what you're doing, so that whatever job you're working at, you can give yourself that bandwidth to do it. The next thing you need to do is have an open mind and a curiosity for improvement. So you got to check your ego at the door. This is one thing I think I was very successful at when I was younger, was that, yeah, I was kind of cocky and whatever, just like everybody else. I thought I had some drawing skills coming out of art school, but when I got into the working environment, I got a rude awakening, because they gave me a scene and I boarded this thing out, and man, it was a real piece of crap. And what I got back was the most valuable feedback ever. So these guys told me, and this was, early on in my career when I first started working in sequences, these guys would tell me, hey, you need to work on this, and this composition, shot flow, shot choice, shot variety, all of these things, and stuff that I thought I had a handle on, and I was completely clueless. So after a while, I learned that. I was very happy that I was getting that kind of feedback, even though it hurt. And man, again, I was scared. That's another moment where you get a reality check, and you have to take with a grain of salt what people's feedback is. And so, but because of that, and I think that was the one benefit in my favor, was that I was open to that. I did not question their authority or their decision making. I could have been like, oh yeah, I think I know what I'm doing here. But in reality, what I did was I took the criticism, I looked for ways in which they were right on, and I tried to figure out how to improve it. I would even ask, those that were willing to give me the knowledge, that I would ask, hey, how do I do this? Okay, so that openness created a culture of education that was implanted in my head. So that's the kind of thing you're going to need to do, because if you don't have the skills to work at the professional level on films and animation and projects that you want to be working on right now, you need to be able to get there. And how you get there, you have to find the right information from the people that are willing to give it to you, and they're going to unlock your potential, essentially. I've seen this many times, and I've had the good fortune and the lovely experience of guiding others into that step, right? I've seen people grow. This is fantastic. I've seen people come in entry level with no skills, and then through exercise and through encouragement and through pushing them in the right direction, all of a sudden they blossom into really badass story artists. Like, these are the guys that can handle very sophisticated and complicated scenes when before they had no idea. And that is a thrilling experience, and it's wonderful to be working alongside those people and see that growth. So that's one of those things, just to reiterate that it is possible. You can do this. Have an open mind, have that curiosity, and have that culture of learning embedded in your mind, and keep that going forever. I know there are points in which you will be able to take a breath and appreciate the success that you've gained at a certain level in your life, okay, and in your career. But that learning needs to continue forever, for your whole career. And those that don't have that fire and that curiosity, I think reach points of stagnation, and they kind of flatline a little bit, right? What you need to do is continue that upward motion where you're always learning and doing new things. So that's one of the things that I personally want to challenge myself to do. And even I offer that advice to you guys who are, who desire to come into this medium and tell your stories. So, okay, that's all the the kind of esoterical, theoretical stuff. Great. I also want to give you and leave you with some very practical tips that you need to be doing. And this you can do no matter what. One, I think you need to have a drawing regimen. I've said this many times to many people, but you need to have a routine. And this has to be like your dojo morning yoga practice, that you do this without fail. And I mean that seriously. You have a sketchbook in your hand at all times, or every single day on the clock, like clockwork, you at a certain hour, you are drawing for at least 20 minutes. Give it, can you do half an hour? Can you do an hour block out of your day that you are drawing? Okay? That you are with a pencil in your hand, making an image, creating something. You're building that hand-eye coordination. You're trying to copy reference. You're trying to improve on the things that you're struggling with, perspective, anatomy, composition, whatever it is, you're working on that constantly. That's a very, very, very important thing you need to be doing. If you can do that even as you're working, fantastic. Find times to do that. If you go for a coffee every day, take your sketchbook and make a sketch, okay? I used to go do this stuff all the time, even in very awkward moments, like at dinner and, at the gym or out with other people. And it was like, after a while, nobody cares. You have a small sketchbook and you kind of hide what it is that you're doing. But that constant working on your technique will pay off. Just trust me on that. Okay, so that's the technical skills. The other thing I want to leave you with too is you have to have the film knowledge. You have to understand the cool factor that some of the guys that we talk about. You need to know what it is that makes a shot cool. And how you do this is you study films and you study other artists and how they do this stuff. So how they're putting compositions together and how they're making their shots flow one from the next. This you can learn from the huge wealth of film language that we already have. There's almost over 100 years of films that we have, almost an infinite amount of information that you can absorb, and it's growing exponentially every single day with the new material that's out there. So that you study. Pick the genre that you like and figure out what it is that you like about it and try and break that down so you can repeat it. Is it because they're tilting the camera lens? Is it because they're moving the camera through the shot? Is it because the actors are moving around in different places in the scene that creates excitement for you? I don't know what it is, but that's what will make your story art very personal. You will be hired because of that sensibility that you have. Some people have more action sensibilities, some people have more comedic sensibilities, some people are very good at composing the drama. Some people can do it all very well. I would love to get to that level. So that's the kind of stuff that you can study and improve on and do it in a very systematic way. Now remember, all this stuff in the beginning I said is very hard. It is very hard, but it is totally and utterly rewarding and fantastic. Doing this stuff is thrilling, even when it's like difficult. And I've had some recent times where it's really challenging to get the story right. You have to battle with deadlines, but even still, there was nothing I would choose to do more than be in that moment and create that story and just experience that emotional beat and experience that you're doing when you're creating a narrative story. There's nothing like it. It's like once you got bitten by the bug, you can't go back, okay? So take that as some words of encouragement. And the other thing I want to leave you with, just to repeat, all this stuff is very possible. You can make a living out of this. You can do the art that you want. You just need to put in the hours and the time to make it happen. So if you need more information, check out the stuff that we have online, and hopefully some of that stuff is helpful. All right, we'll see you next time.